All right, imagine, viewer, or listener, whatever. Imagine title cards. Welcome to the Some Like It Hot podcast. This is the end of video podcasts. Do you consume with that face? This cryptic nonsense is brought to you by Mr. Jean-Luc Godard, who's today's subject.
I'm surprised I made it through that.
Dump it. But anyway, so welcome to Some Like the Hot Takes. I'm Gavin Batoe with.
I'm Andrea Knapp.
And today we'll be going over the always easy to talk about Jean-Luc Godard, one of the premier filmmakers of what is known as the French New Wave, who, while, many people might be like, I never heard of their movies. Perhaps you haven't, but they may have influenced a couple of names that you recognize. Andrea?
Such as Quentin Tarantino.
Right, that's a big one. And a lot of others like Martin Scorsese. I'd argue a lot of filmmakers. Like pretty much most people who came out of the French New Wave, but a lot of people who came from Hollywood, especially during like the 70s period, watched a lot of his movies, along with Truffaut, Agnes Varda, a lot of people like that. But Godard is our subject today because of just how lovably bizarre almost everything he does is. And what's interesting is when I originally pitched this to Andrea, who you've told me you've never seen one of his movies before.
No, I watched 2 of his movies this week for this episode, and that's all I've seen.
And it's funny because when you're pitching someone Godard, it's a very tough thing to do.
Yeah.
Because you never know where to start. Because here's the problem comes in the fact that his 60s period is probably my favorite period. Which that's like saying to a Godard like aficionado, which I've seen a fair amount of his movies, but I'm not like I haven't seen everything, right? Like I'm still like in the process of getting into him, right? I would consider myself a fan of his work,
Yeah.
but I'm definitely like someone who hasn't seen everything, because saying you like early Godard is like saying you like early Beatles to some people, because it's not the weird stuff, which is like I don't know how to feel with that, but. So his early stuff in the 60s was very much focused on youth culture in the 60s.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
His later stuff, which, here's what happened. I watched his first film, which we'll be talking about today, Breathless. That was my first film I watched by him. Thought, okay, this is pretty good. Interesting. Let's see what else he's done. And I watched the film he did later on, which I'll be talking about, called a little film called Goodbye to Language, which is a video essay film he made in 2014, made in 3D.
What?
That's a conversation that we'll lead up to, because for right now, let's start with the basics. So, Andre, did you have any knowledge of who Godard was before?
I knew he is definitely someone who you do study in film school. You'll see his name pop up on a test here and there. Because the French New Wave movement is something that I've seen a lot more Agnes Varda movies. I've seen a lot of her stuff.
I love Agnes Varda.
I love her.
She's incredible. Cleo from 5 to 7, incredible.
Right. So I've seen a lot of the French New Wave style with cinema verite, but like I said, I hadn't seen any Jean-Luc Godard before he pitched this to me. And then I watched Breathless and Masculine Feminine, which were both from his 60s period.
Right.
Breathless was 60 and then Masculine Feminine was 68. So I can't say I'm too well versed in him, but man, do I have thoughts about the 2 I saw.
So I guess going over a little bit about the French New Wave period is important before getting into this. Godard, along with Truffaut, which, have you seen any films by Truffaut? 400 Blows is the big one.
Yeah, that's the only one I've seen.
Which maybe is my personal favorite film of the early French New Wave. I love that movie. 400 Blows is a masterpiece. But these guys primarily started out as film critics. It was the first ever generation of people who really loved movies. Like, they grew up on movies. Because when we think of old movies, like, we're talking about like people like John Ford, William Wyler, John Huston, people like that in America. What's important to mention is, while some of them may have seen early silent film, they weren't really film fans who became movie makers. They were people who worked in different fields and then became filmmakers and directors by proxy. The French New Wave was really the first notable time that people who grew up obsessed with movies became movie makers.
Yeah, they were like the first class, I guess.
Right. Because at the time there were film critics in France, a lot of the big releases were historical epics that straight literary adaptations.
Mm-hmm.
And Godard and Truffaut were like, we hate this. This stinks and is bad because it's annoying. They idolized people like Alfred Hitchcock before it was cool. Because believe it or not, there was a time in which Alfred Hitchcock was kind of like, oh, he's some cheapo, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, who cares about good? They were the first people to be like, no, this is a auteur, which is where the name first came from.
Yeah.
These guys, because they're like, the director is the voice, not the script.
The director. Very
because
like authorship, I think is the direct translation.
Authorship.
And then the French New Wave period really coined what's called cinema verite, which is kind of more, it's used a lot more in documentary filmmaking than it is in narrative filmmaking anymore. But it's essentially this kind of fly on the wall perspective of you just stick a camera in the room and it doesn't really move, it doesn't really cut, it just kind of stays there and observes. And that's and with French New Wave, they didn't have, it was very early indie filmmaking as well, because it really was
worked on the streets.
They just worked. The Italians also ended up doing it too in the coming decade.
Neorealism, which I think was before this a little bit.
I think they were contemporaries of each other. I think.
I think neorealism happened right after the war. So like Bicycle Thieves was 1948.
Oh, that was 48. Okay.
Yeah, 1948. But I do think it is a notable difference because what that was trying to do is capture Italian and war period, which was a general like a time of crisis for many people.
And
what this did was very interesting because unlike neorealism, which very much is of its moment, what Godard was trying to do with movies like Breathless, it's very postmodern. This is a movie about the youth. This movie is about people who subvert expectations. And Godard worked in a method in which he loved film, but he didn't like where film was going. And during his entire career, which by the way, he died in 2022. Like, he was making movies up until then. He was like, I want to push this medium as far as it can go, subvert it to its last dying breath.
He does definitely achieve that. But I think it's also like a reoccurring theme is this idea of pushing film to its medium, but then also that more conservative, traditional arts mindset, which is, I think, kind of interesting. So, I mean,
like, his influences are those people primarily. But he seeks to get away from it. But he's also doing it, especially in these early movies, which I think the reason why a lot of people who aren't Godard nuts love these early ones is because they're more approachable. Like, which
I would counter that.
You haven't seen his later movies.
That's
Holy
true.
cow, they're unapproachable.
I feel like, granted, I go to film school. I've seen a lot of movies. I watch a lot of movies. How do you think like your average movie Joe could actually would actually sit down and enjoy like Breathless, Masculine, Feminine? Because I mean, even I had a hard time. I sounded so cocky. But even I still had a hard time getting into those movies. So I feel like even just he's approachable, but I feel he's still kind of this more.
Oh, he's tougher. He's no Steven Spielberg, right?
He's not. I wouldn't call him a more mainstream, approachable director. But also
in this period, I'd argue, especially
for his
films
time,
right? And I'd argue films like Band Apart. I think in this specific early period, which like we're gonna get to it, Breathless and Masculine Feminine, I think work less so because here's the thing: they're plotless films. Essentially plotless technically. They're very lackadaisical in pace. Like the story is not what necessarily matters.
Because I mean, there is a plot. I mean, with Breathless, there is a plot.
But really describing the plot doesn't give you anything more.
It's not. It's more of a character piece.
Right, and I'd argue Masculine Feminine is something that is more dristless. It's way more like less direct. Like if I describe the plot of Masculine Feminine to somebody just in what happens, I look like a crazy person. That's pretty much what it's like to describe a Godard movie. But what really comes down to, especially in films like Band Apart, Pierre Le Fou, is they're more or less films where it's kind of driftless. Like you're kind of drifting from scene to scene. Like I would argue it's approachable in the sense that scenes like that, you can follow what's happening, but it's very much like make of it what you will, make up the themes of what you will. But you can still understand what's happening in a scene, but it's your job what you want to choose to connect with.
Yeah.
Other films I'd argue is way more either you want to get it or you don't.
Yeah. I mean, I can't speak to his later films, so.
Right. But here's the thing about Breathless, which is the film we'll start with. Breathless is a film that I think has been misread over the years. Because when people watch this movie, I'll let you get to it in a second, but I'll let you jump on it. So Breathless is a movie that was his first, and it's a lot of people position it in a way where they view it as a young love story between a French man and an American writer. And this movie is not that. This movie is not that. But here's the thing.
That's like calling Nosferatu Twilight. What?
But I think the filmmaking adds to this discrepancy. Because the filmmaking here is so cool. The filmmaking makes it look cool. It makes our main character, for all of his bull crap, all of his just bizarre idiosyncrasies that just make him just a complete ass, the worst. He's the worst. He's but the film still chooses to make him with the sunglasses and everything. So Andrea, I had the glory of watching your reaction to this movie. Can you talk about a little what the plot is before we really get into it?
When I was watching for the first time, I was texting him going, "What the heck?" So basically, and
I'm like, well, that's just the way it rolls, I guess.
So basically, the plot boils down to this: sleep with me, no. Sleep with me, no. Sleep with me. Okay, fine. If you shut up. Okay, sleep with me again, no. And that's how, yeah.
Well,
there's more to it than that. It's this guy. He shoots a cop trying to get out of a speeding.
After being like, yeah, I'm kind of a bad guy.
Yeah,
and then
just the first line of the movie. I'm a bad guy.
I'm kind of a bad guy.
He shoots a cop to get out of a speeding ticket, and then he goes to his kind of girlfriend's apartment because they had slept together before. They weren't really lovers. And then it's basically what I said. And then eventually they run away to escape the law. And she, having enough of him, reports him. And then the police come after him, and he gets shot, and he dies, and the movie's over. Sorry, spoilers.
So, here's the thing. This movie very much is a good summation of some of his themes. I think one of my favorite parts in the movie is how because what was very modern about this movie is the way it referenced movies. We don't think about it a lot now, but movies referencing other movies was a crazy concept back then.
Yeah, because she was hanging like posters up, and she's like, where? And like, which is like different movie posters.
And of course, the iconic scene of the movie is the scene in which he sees a picture of Humphrey Bogart and tries to look more like him.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the most famous part of the movie, and I do think that scene specifically embodies so much of what the film actually is.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we're really seeing is the opening scene where he's like, I'm a bad guy. When I originally talking about it, you said it kind of like the movie kind of is making you think he's a bad guy. I didn't really see it like that. I saw it as a guy who's trying to be Humphrey Bogart, in the sense that Humphrey Bogart in his movies, which by the way, Humphrey Bogart was an old, he used to act in like detective stories. He used to be a noir guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was in Casablanca. That's the main way you know him. He's the cool guy in Casablanca.
Yeah.
The thing is, I view that opening scene of him trying to be Humphrey Bogart. He's like, I kind of have a storied past. I'm not a good guy, see? I'm not that cool of a guy. But here's the thing. Unlike Bogart, who he's trying to emulate, his character has no purpose. He has no actual like purpose or meaning behind anything, which I think then leads to him just randomly killing a cop. That's him just like trying to look cooler and more mysterious than he actually is by just doing something idiotic. And I think that was leads to the relationship, because the relationship arguably I think mirrors like something like To Have or Have Not or The Big Sleep, where it is Bogart oftentimes talking to these younger women, which is like the 19, 20, it's weird, whatever. Yeah. But it is these relationships of a guy who's like trying not to seem desperate, but because
is desperate.
But because it's this specific character, he's absolutely desperate and lonely.
I mean, I don't know much about Godard himself. I was going to speak to what I observed in the film. He's like, I'm a bad guy, and at first it's like, okay, he's trying to act the tough guy, but guys like these are dangerous. Ladies listening to this podcast will know exactly what I mean. These are the kind, I know one of these guys, I go to film school with him. They're the kind of people who have nothing really redeeming or interesting about them. but try to make themselves seem cooler by their relationship with women.
And that's really what the film is getting at, and what I think is interesting, because Godard obviously thinks all of this stuff. He thinks the same thing. Like, he thinks the same thing as this character. He's like, Bogart is cool. This is cool. Sunglasses and cigarettes are cool. But he's very much saying that even though he is an idiot, and he's nothing else but an idiot, it still leads to people dying.
The film goes out of its way to make you not like this dude, which is where I kind of struggle with the film a little bit, because it's a character piece where you hate the main character. I was rooting for the girl the entire time,
and I do as well. But I love movies like that. I do love bad character studies about bad people.
I struggle with this movie just on a personal level, because, like I said, I go to a school with a guy like this, and these are the kind of guy who, in their conquest of women, will end up doing absolutely terrible things, and then try to damage control of, oh, these rumors are so fake. So when you do come out and say, hey, these things happened, no one believes you. Right. And that's where I struggle with this film, because he's that kind of guy.
He's very uncomfortable. He's a really uncomfortable
There is a 20-minute long scene that I hated it. And then there's this other scene where this girl was like, hey, I got pregnant. And he's like, well, you should have been more careful. What do you mean, you? Birth control doesn't exist yet. What do you mean, you? Like,
he's like, I don't know what you're talking about, Bogart.
And that's why it's like, I don't know. I don't think Godard is trying to idolize this character in any way, shape, or form. But I don't know. It's not a movie.
Here's the thing. The thing is about Godard that makes him interesting in this period is that he absolutely does not want us to sympathize with this character, but it feels so uncomfortably real that he at least had to know somebody like this or feels this character in him.
I know it's the latter. That's
what's so weird about it.
It's the latter. So I'm like, Godard.
I think part of this character reminds him of himself, and I do think that comes from that idea of what if, and I do think that is reflective of his later movies, because it's the idea of because there's two ways to look at it. One is the realistic angle, which is the 60s youth movement. Mm-hmm. Following this character will objectively lead to death. That's the one way of looking at it, right? That's a way of saying idolizing these characters.
That's how I viewed it.
Leads to toxic masculinity. But the other way of viewing it is as a film. He's saying following too close to your idols will lead to death.
Kind of like don't meet your heroes, kids.
Right. But as a filmmaker, I think that also says a lot about Godard.
Mm-hmm.
Last thing I want to say about Godard, the two quick things I want to say is, one, I love the ending. I think the ending...
I loved the ending.
So the point is, she says like...
I was cheering.
Yeah, she's like, you know what? Call on the cops. It's...
Why did she then tell him she reported him? Why did they just pack up and leave?
I do think it has something to do with... I do think this character kind of like I think... For the credit I'm giving Godard, I do think the girl is kind of underwritten.
I mean, okay, well, there is...
In parts, I think she
does place an emphasis on the fact that she doesn't feel beautiful, because in the 60s... And
I like that part of it. I think she's dependent on him.
She is dependent on him. Because the 60s you did with the youth movement, you started to see the rise of those really unrealistic body standards in modeling. Like that's when it really started to take off.
And a lot of Godard's movies are about that.
Mm-hmm. So she is underwritten, but I do resonate with her. I resonate with her mindset of like, well, I don't have anyone else. This is the best I can do. And I know that's the thing. But a lot of women.
She's so about that she's able to still like tell someone even they reported them to the cops.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's an interesting angle. But point is, movie ends, the guy gets shot. The last thing that he says to her, he's like, it's so interesting how many ways this scene has been translated, but he's literally like saying something like mean to her, right? His last words, like, why would you do this to me? And she's American. She doesn't understand what he's saying.
Oh,
and I do think...
Yeah, she has to go to the cop, and she's like, he said, you make me puke. And she was like, puke? What does that mean?
Puke, what does that mean? I love that scene. And I think that scene is so emblematic of the idea that undeniably, people like this will never be able to communicate fully. Yeah. And it is a joke, technically, about the French language language and American language.
Yeah.
But on a greater level, it definitely says a lot more about communication. Even harsh words, that the idea of communication, none of that would change even if the language was different, because what it really comes down to is mean words are never fully take their effect, and two people who use those words in any language will never be able to communicate.
I will say I did like the theme of the film. I like the cinematography of the film.
Oh, the jump cuts, the editing.
I like the use of jump cuts was really interesting. Which,
really quick, a jump cut, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but a jump cut viewer is basically the idea of, if I'm cutting to a scene where I'm like putting my hand down on a table, in a normal movie, my hand would be coming down and it cuts to my hand landing on the table. What a jump cut kind of does is the movement is shot both ways, where you see the hand move in two different shots. So it has this immediate, like, off-putting base to it.
Another way jump cuts are usually used with passage of time. Like, if you're, like, say you're in the middle of a dinner scene, it suddenly cuts and it's bright day. That'd be a jump cut.
Or in action movies where it cuts to, like, someone punching someone, like, from 3 different angles.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways jump cuts can be used, but they are very jarring. And I will say the tone, like, that uncomfortable tone is done very well in the film.
You can feel, like, the performances are phenomenal.
But
I love these
because of that, it's a film I very much struggled with.
It's a tough film sometimes.
I struggled with it. Because I mean, I was rooting for the girl the entire time, but just having experienced that kind of toxic masculinity in my life before, I don't want to be reminded of it. I don't. And I feel like, okay, for the time, calling out this kind of behavior was definitely like a whoa, okay. Where now it's kind of a bit more mainstream to do so. So I feel like that's kind of just been like oversaturated.
But I do think the way it approaches it from the male angle, because the thing is, it is very inflammatory towards the guy, but it's thoroughly from his perspective.
Yeah, and that's where I kind of struggle with
that. That is where it's different. That's
kind of why I struggle with this movie, though, because I'm like, how much of this is Godard being an archer, and how much of this is him being like, don't be that guy?
I think he is self-hatred. I think I worded it to you. I said it was a self-hating film that loves itself.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the way to put this. And it's funny because this film is very much portrayed as like the movie that people start with Godard with. You start by watching this movie. But you recommended a movie just, I think by the title, you wanted to watch Masculine Feminine. And I now think if you're going to get into Godard, this is the one to watch, because it tackles a lot of the same, some of the same themes, but it goes even deeper with it. It's even more Godardian in its visual language. It's funny. It's everything that Breathless is, but you turn it up and adding a bunch of new angles on it. And this movie is completely whacked out.
This is a Masculine Feminine. It was one, because I was just looking at like some of the movies that are on HBO. And I saw that one, and it's about a writer who falls in love with a wannabe pop singer, which instantly I'm like, okay, well, this is a metaphor between the conservative styles of art versus the more progressive styles of art, and, all pretentious. And that instantly drew me in, because I love those kind of stories. And granted, I knew I wasn't in for a cheesy rom-com, but this didn't seem quite as uncomfortable as the other one.
Right, it's way more fanciful. Like,
it is.
The opening scene, scene.
That is so funny. I'm sorry. The opening scene had me cracking up.
He's in the cafe. He's like talking, and then in the background there's a couple, right? A couple with a kid, right? They're having an argument as he's having a discussion to himself, right? About like women and how he views women. And something happens.
And he's less of a toxic jerk. He's much nicer of a dude.
He's a loser. That's the difference.
He's a loser. He's still a loser.
What I like about it, and here's the thing, I think it is a subversion on the trope, because what you have in Breathless is a character who loves Bogart and thinks cigarettes are cool and will try his best to look cool with it. This character tries to do the same things, but fails very blatantly. Yeah. He's so uncool, but he still tries. This is a character that less so is affirmative in their masculinity, as in he doesn't understand anything. I think later in the opening scene, I thought it was so funny because, and I think that's kind of a bigger Godardian thing. This character just got off of his military service, so he's complaining about the whole military service system, and I'm like, so you're complaining about the patriarchy? Who set it up? Like, who set that up?
We set that up.
Like this character, like I love this character because he's like he's so like he joins all the movies. He's like, why not? But I don't think he actually knows anything about
No,
it.
he's one of those guys. He's one of those guys who slaps the donkey on their car bumper and is like, and then just like joins all of the causes, not understanding any. He's the guy who's like, I'm a feminist. What's an IUD?
But here's the Godard thing. Cuts to the opening title scenes. He's having that inner monologue in the cafe. In the background, there's a couple having an argument. One of them has a kid. The man takes the kid, calls her like a dirty word, runs out. She pulls a gun and shoots him.
I was sitting there just like, I was just sitting there like, good for you.
Oh, what a way to start a movie. And a lot of the film is like that. Because he starts to get in a relationship and certain elements start to make themselves more clear. Like, for example, I think I love the intercuts, the title cards here.
To kind of give you guys an idea, Pulp Fiction is like one of the kind of the obligatory film school movie. It has like these little vignettes, and there's still a larger story, but all the vignettes are disconjoined and out of order. That's how this movie is, and Pulp Fiction is very much inspired by this. It is a series. How many vignettes? 13? 14?
There's 13. Like, it keeps numbering. Like,
it keeps numbering. There's like 13 different vignettes, completely unrelated, but still tell the story of this couple's relationship. And in between each one, there's also like random philosophical quotes, which I think is so funny, but that's a different thing.
Right. It's really funny. Godard is very much underappreciated for how funny of a director he is. Like, one of my, I think if there is a thesis for his career, it's in this movie. This one is the thesis. Yeah. Because there's a title card that cuts to in the middle of it. It goes, I have a new title. It goes something like this. This movie that you're watching, this movie could be called The Children of Marx and Coca-Cola. Understand what you will.
Yep. This whole movie can basically be summed up as
that.
Or as, yo, De Gaulle, you suck. Like, that's pretty much, that is the
fake Bob Dylan lyrics are so funny.
Fake Bob Dylan. There's also, like, the main dude becomes a journalist. So, like, there's these random interviews just put in the plot. And he's like, so birth control, that's new. And she's like, yeah. He's like, you ever been in love? Yeah. Vietnam.
So Vietnam.
And she's like, huh?
I've actually seen people talk like this. It's amazing.
I know.
And here's like, I love this film's wacky sense of humor. It's really, really political as well.
Oh, absolutely. Like this is
a very political movie. Like,
I think, again, this is me not knowing too much about Godard. Take it as you will. Gavin, correct me if I'm wrong. This film is absurd. Like,
absurd.
When the guy, like, there's a scene outside of a laundromat, and this other dude pulls a knife on the main character, so he's like, oh no, I'm gonna get mugged. Stabs himself. And he's just like, oh, and goes on with his day.
Oh, like, the scene with the match, where he's like, can I borrow a match?
Yeah, that scene. And I feel like that whole thing is just a metaphor for the political absurdity, the political circus that was De Gaulle in France in the 1960s post-World War II. And I feel like that's kind of Godard's also kind of whole political thesis of, this is absurd. It's time to make a movie showing said absurdism. How do you like that, De Gaulle?
I think Godard likes this stuff, but he also detests this stuff. That's why Godard, I feel like to compare him to Bob Dylan, I think is actually a good comparison.
That was
because
funny.
kind of like both, I do think a lot of times their politics don't even, and it's weird how this works. It's like their politics really never really fully show themselves, at least in these two. They never really fully show them. They never show their full hand, but they wish to give them both credence. Like, for example, you do get the understanding that what they're doing is a good cause, but it's the absurdism of, like, for example, there's a scene where he goes to use the bathroom at a place, and he enters like a stall, and there's like two guys like making out in there. And he's like, hey, get out. So he closes the stall, uses the urinal, walks out, and then sees the door, and then starts writing like political messages on the door. And like, that's such a loaded image, especially for like the 60s. It's a really, really big image. And he does stuff like that all the time, and you're never quite sure what he thinks about it. But I do think there's a part at the end I think is really poignant. And to me, it's the most poignant scene in the movie, where it's his ending monologue where he's talking about the interviews before, spoilers, he basically dies because they can't decide.
Does he jump out of a window or does he fall?
Well, here's the thing. I don't think they ever make it clear. Some think that he jumped out because of suicide. Some thinks it was an accident. So he dies, and he goes on to say, I realize now that my interviews are they're not genuine. They're not real, like, because the idea is I'm trying to do an unbiased form of life by giving these interviews, but undeniably each interview has its own, through both sides, has its own ideology. And basically, I think that's Godard talking about portraying politics through film. It's truly impossible to be like fully like unpolitical in film.
You cannot be an auteur and be unpolitical. It's just impossible.
Not even an auteur, an artist. I think any artist, no matter how political you choose to be, certain ideologies are always going to be based in some political. For example, he says a lot of the decisions made during the interviews, a lot of policies here in France, this is the character, a lot of policies here in France are based on past decisions, decisions and ideologies made in the past, not the present. It's a fascinating idea. And I think when you work at it like that, that's my Godard. That's the Godard.
Yeah, and what's also still like all of that is still wrapped up.
It's still so funny. It's crazy. It's all of that's
wrapped up in this crazy little love story. But it's actually a romance, unlike Breathless.
Right. Okay, so those are the two Godards we went over, right? We wanted to see kind of what I kind of want to give you a quick kind of simple crash course, because now I kind of do think maybe giving you those two back to back was a bit redundant, I think.
Yeah.
Which there are several Godards that I think are really interesting. For example, I think it really comes down to it, I think you could have just watched Masculine and Feminine, and this is to you guys out there. I think if you're gonna start with one, try Masculine and Feminine. I think you might actually like that, and you'll be surprised. That's a very surprising movie to watch. So, but here's the thing. That's not all he used to do. Because in the 60s, he also made a little movie called Alphaville. Now, Alphaville is a sci-fi noir set in the future. But it still kept with that, cinema verite thing. Where basically it's like, what if you made a sci-fi movie set in the future, but you don't do any like sci-fi sets or anything, and you just focus on little bits of like technology? For example, there's a scene where like there's supposedly a robot and it just holds on like a person talking to like a voice as it focuses on like a crane moving. And it's interesting. It's really just like a subtle way of doing like a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, weird. I mean, I like that. It seems like it's like a lot of sci-fi. It's like you think sci-fi, think Star Wars or Star Trek.
Or Blade Runner, which arguably this movie's Blade Runner is kind of like, what if you gave...
I have not seen Blade Runner. I haven't seen it.
That's alright. My dad's a huge fan of that movie.
Okay.
My dad's a big fan.
I mean, I like that idea. I don't, with sci-fi, I feel like it's always like, I like fantasy, don't get me wrong. But sci-fi, like fantasy's out there. Sci-fi's always had a little bit of grounded in this, but like it's too
Sci-fi
far.
is always like based on something in society.
Yeah, but I like that this is just like a little bit. Kind of like, was it inspired by Brave New World by chance?
It might have been. Okay. I think that's probably a good chance. I do think Godard was the first filmmaker to really focus. Most of his films are films about movies, really. Like, for example, this movie, I'd argue the act of him doing a very minimalist sci-fi movie is him like commenting on what is genre.
When did Space Odyssey was the 70s, right?
Late 60s. That was Kubrick.
Yeah, but I'm like, was this in reaction to that at all?
I think that was... Actually, let me check. I don't think it was, though. I think it was just him, like, viewing sci-fi merely as, like, a genre.
Because, I mean, yeah, Space Odyssey was genre-defining. I feel like the biggest sci-fi was Metropolis. Metropolis. This is 65. This is 3 years before Space Odyssey. Okay.
I think this is him looking at, like, Raymond Chandler novels and also like B movies of sci-fi, like set in the future, like Day the Earth Stood Still and stuff like that. Okay. It's kind of like a take on that stuff. But okay, so that's that movie. I love that movie. There's also a movie, I think, because like, okay, Weekend is very much a movie like Masculine and Feminine. That might be the one I if you like this sort of absurd comedy, I think you would like Weekend. It's basically a movie about a couple trying to like go on vacation, so they like take a weekend. Like, for example, like they try to go in their car, but like the opening scene is just them being stuck in traffic.
Right.
Here's what's interesting about the way they filmed it. Certain actors, like I heard of this somewhere, like actors before they started to take, right? You know what? An actor gets ready and then they get in the character, right? They would shoot that stuff and leave it in the movie.
Interesting.
And they did that a lot. here's the thing. That was at the end of the 60s that he made this movie, right?
I really
That
hope
time
they
in-
don't do anything weird, because I knew a guy who'd slap himself, like, before we went on stage to do a monologue, he just like, starts smacking himself. So I feel like that'd be really funny to keep in.
Yeah, I did watch that movie. Like, I think I was doing a long marathon of movies, and I just happened to watch that one.
I hope they didn't do anything
That's stuck in my mind as a
weird.
weird. But I honestly need to rewatch that. I think I really need to rewatch that one.
That'd be if you start seeing actors inexplicably smacking themselves.
Yeah, I'll know I'll know who caused that. But it ends with this basic thing. The end titles, right? Which is arguably Godard's trademark, and he has one, is the title card.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And here's the thing. This movie, which is a black comedy, which is thoroughly a comedy. Like, Masculine and Feminine, I'd argue, like, balances a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Weekend is a straight up comedy, right? The movie ends with a title card that says "End of Cinema."
Instead of just Finn, just end of cinema.
Well, it says Finn, but like one of the title cards is "End of Cinema," which I'd argue is a literal point in which Godard takes any of his former pretense and chucks it out the window.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, so I was gonna ask, is that like end of cinema in its current incarnation? Is that end of his
because if there's
style?
if there's anyone who hates movies more than anyone, it's Godard. Then you know what, Godard, one of the coldest filmmakers who ever lived. He's very cold in a lot of his decisions, and really, when he does like a movie like this, he says the end of cinema. I don't know if he fully intended this to be the case, but all of his later movies kind of get away from this idea of what happened to the old Godard. He used to be more, normal, conventional. I used to understand what was going on. His later movies, which I've only seen a couple of his laters. I've seen one in the 90s called Nouvelle Vague, which is a it means new wave. I probably butchered that French pronunciation. I'm so sorry. But it's a movie starring Aline Dion, who died, I think, last year. It basically is a movie that acts as a symbolic narrative for what the French New Wave was, and it's even more unconventional than this. It's even more just like in its own head, even more like you have to like actively seek for an understanding of what's going on. And honestly, I was a little less vibey with that stuff, but whatever, c'est la vie. Then you get to the actual essays, which you then reach a movie like Goodbye to Language. It was his last huge hit. Well, when I say huge, I mean it premiered at Cannes. People liked it at Cannes. And what followed was a bunch of film critics who were like, what the hell is this? And it literally is a video essay that he just compiled a lot of random scenes that he shot. Then it's shot in 3D. And this is his response to Avatar's 3D success.
Avatar
So if you guys heard of this little obscure movie called Avatar by James Cameron.
Okay.
Right, okay.
I always have to. I'm an Avatar The Last Airbender fan, so I always have to like distinguish which one, the blue people or not.
What if Godard watched Nickelodeon and he saw like an episode of Avatar? It was like, he's like, I know what my next movie is about. I know exactly. And
he's the one who is he the one who told M. Night Shyamalan to pronounce it Ong? Is that him?
He's watching Fairly Odd Parents and goes, Dinkelberg. But so basically, this movie, James Cameron Avatar, popularized 3D. 3D was back in the mainstream. Godard, one thing you need to know about him is if something's popular, he will find a way to subvert it, no matter what it is. So he made an essay movie using 3D where he's like commenting on things, and it's really nonsensical. Like it's that nonsensical half the time. It's got like scenes, like I think they were shot in like infrared. It's weird. Like that.
Infrared.
Okay, I could be confusing this with like film Socialisme, which is kind of a similar idea. I need to rewatch both of these movies because I watched them, and I'm gonna be honest. I'll be honest to our viewers. If we somehow do have a viewer who is more knowledgeable about Godard, I apologize. I made a wrong decision for myself by doing Breathless and then that one, because I was watching this like, God, I miss the chauvinists, because at least then I can understand what he's doing. What is this? I know what I was doing. So I'll tell you, I had very little idea what was going on in those, but I respect where he's going for, and I feel like if I had more knowledge, I can maybe return to those. But for right now, that's kind of where my knowledge ends.
I think you're going to take the medal for this one. I feel like you kind of Godard got the market cornered for now.
I got them in terms of South Jersey film people. I'm one of the most knowledgeable people about Godard out there.
That's safe bet.
Yeah, but it's pretty good, pretty reasonable. But here's the thing. I think the one thing I want to press about Godard before we get into our final thoughts is I praise Godard, but I will say he is an absolute jerk, and I will agree with that summation entirely. For example, Francois Truffaut, as we've previously mentioned, I'll pull this up as we're doing this. As we mentioned, during the 70s, they got into a bit of a beef after being previously known as like the two coolest guys, right? The two cool French New Wave guys. They got into a beef in the 70s, the film equivalent of the Drake versus Kendrick.
Did it involve A minor? Or we'll leave that with DiCaprio?
No, it did not. It was less one-sided. It was a weird argument because what happened was Truffaut made a little movie called Day for Night, which is a movie about movie making, right? Godard watched this movie and said, I think you're dumb and you're stupid and that I hate this movie. It's so bad. It is so bad and you're awful.
Was it, or is that just him saying that?
No, Godard was just like, you suck. Like, you are so dishonest about filmmaking. Like,
Got it.
And then Truffaut wrote a whole letter to him. Like, he wrote a whole letter to Godard, kind of calling him the, like, really, really bad. For example, Jean-Luc Godard, this is what he said. He said, yeah, Truffaut wrote this letter to Truffaut after making the movie. Yesterday, I saw your movie. Probably no one else will call you a liar, so I will. It's no more an insult than fascists. It's a criticism, and it's absence of criticism that I complain in films of Chabot, Ferreri, Delaney. I don't know any of those people, but I do know Jean Renoir. So like people like films like Renoir. You say films are trains that pass in the night, but who takes the train? In what class? And who is driving it with an informer? From the management standing on its side, directors like those mentioned make film trains as well. And if you aren't referring to the Trans Europe, then maybe it's a local train. Or else the one from Munich to Dachau.
Munich to where?
Dachau.
Okay.
Oh my god. Yeah, so Godard is a little petty.
Little bit.
But they stop being friends, and Godard's a little jerk. But arguably, this jerkish quality led to one of the funniest short films ever made. And this short film, my friends, is called Meetin' W.A., which is a movie that, starting this podcast, I had the idea of movies I want to talk about. I want more people to see this and search this thing out. So in the 80s, there was a filmmaker by the name of Woody Allen, who, very hot topic for many a reason that I will not get into here. We will not get into here.
No.
Very controversial figure. But in the 80s, he was huge. He was making really big movies that a lot of people liked, right? But he never wanted to go anywhere. He never wanted to go anywhere to promote his movies. Godard said, I will invite you to Cannes to do an interview to promote Hannah and Her Sisters. And he went, okay. Woody flew to Cannes, and Godard interviewed Woody, and I swear to God, even though Godard was like Woody probably watched Godard's movies like growing up, I swear to God, Godard literally just takes this opportunity to just roast Woody Allen. Like, for example, like Woody Allen is all about being like, I don't like TV. Like, I think TV is an artless format. And then very pretentious Woody thing to say. Godard probably agrees with Woody, and maybe somewhat, but he's like, well, I look at Hannah and Her Sisters and the way that production design looks, and I had to say, it reminds me a lot of television. And Woody's like, what are you saying? I can't believe this. Like I don't agree at all. Like he's trying to defend himself. Like he gets really nervous, and it's like the funniest thing ever. And then eventually he says something like, he's like, there's a theory nowadays that, when you're watching television, if you look at color TV for too long, it'll strain your eyes. And it literally feels like a conversation between two people. It literally is one of the most petty arguments ever by two of the most petty, unlikable people, and it's so funny. It's
Great.
hilarious. I love it. If you can check this movie out, this short film out, check it out, because it's honestly just, when are you going to see something like this? Like, when are you going to see two people, one's a jerk, and one would later be known as even something worse than a jerk later on, and then you see you see the two, just, it's the funniest thing, and it's one of those things, it's like, how does this exist? And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And, you know, I mean, I like Hannah and Her Sisters. I think it's a great movie, but God, I want every single time someone watches Hannah and Her Sisters, watch this before it, because it makes Hannah and Her Sisters so much funnier. All right, but that's so okay. So all that thought about Godard, and even in terms of someone he's hating, arguably he made that movie better for me.
Fair enough.
Godard
fair enough.
and the film. So summing up, what do you think of Godard?
Honestly, pretty mixed feelings. Great movie, great director. Not for me, especially Breathless. I could not get over Breathless.
Breathless, I will say, upon a rewatch for me, definitely stands out a little less.
Yeah, I feel like I would
yeah.
check out. Was it which one had the sci-fi? Was that Alpine?
Alphaville.
Alphaville.
Interesting.
Like,
Alphaville.
He's a director I probably would continue to check out, but I can't say I'm like, wow, I'm gonna get a Godard poster.
I have a lot of I have a friend who currently goes to Montclair, who I used to know, who's in film. She loves Contempt. Contempt is one of her favorites. Contempt. I heard Contempt is great.
Yeah, he's a director I probably continue to like seek out, but I feel like he was he's a director I continue to seek out, but not when I feel like, but not when I feel like I'd revisit. If that makes sense.
Like if you see a film by him, it's like, all right, that's that film. Like, he's not gonna live in your brain.
Yeah,
I would agree with you there. I do think for me, like, Godard is a filmmaker who I like. I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan. I'm an appreciator of a lot of his films, but I feel as if for me, Godard's always a tough filmmaker to approach. Like, he's not a filmmaker that oftentimes like, for example, if I want a better time, I'll go to someone like Francois Truffaut or Agnes Varda.
Yeah.
With Godard, sometimes I have to be in a very specific mood to watch.
Oh, absolutely. I had to watch Masculine and Feminine in pieces. I mean, I was busy that day, but watching it in pieces kind of helped.
But it's a good movie. Masculine and Feminine is a very good movie.
I feel like, I feel like with Godard, it may not be his work themselves, but his influence. I feel like that's the key with Godard. Because, I mean, Tarantino named his production company after a Godard film.
Band Apart. Which, by the way, my favorite story is that Tarantino named his production company Band Apart, and Tarantino said this thing that was so petty of him. He went like, so I grew up. I grew out of Jean-Luc Godard. That's literally Tarantino. He said, I grew out of him. Like, I would like his movies, and then I didn't. And then Godard went, you named your production company out of one of my worst movies. You're an idiot.
Well, that's Tarantino. Tarantino's his own little character.
Yeah. But, you know, I do think Godard,
influence.
The influence. And I do think if there's anything I love about Godard, it's that genuinely when he watches movies, and we mentioned Orson Welles in a previous episode about Shakespeare, and the idea of this being the polar opposite. Well, by the way, these two people also, I don't think, liked each other very much.
Probably not.
But makes sense. Two egotists get into a room. My God, what are you going to do?
Oh, no.
But here's the thing. Orson Welles is a guy who makes films despite not knowing movies. Godard is a person who makes movies. Basically, all of his movies are about movies. All of them. And really what it is a guy who, no matter what you can say about his movies, is that it's always something unique. And at least for me, someone who wants to make smaller films, I look at Godard as an influence, less so in specific movies, but in the technique in which his anything goes, because why not, atmosphere.
His style.
His reckless abandonment of norm, I love. So that's our Jean-Luc Godard episode. What are we going over next, Andrea?
So next time we are covering the comedic genius of Robert Eggers.
Of course, one of the greats of comedy.
Yes.
One of the absolute greats.
Robert Eggers, he directed Vavitch, Lighthouse, and Nosferatu.
Hysterical.
Comedic genius. What a
Comedic
great.
masterpiece.
Yep.
So, for context, viewer who knows Robert Eggers, who's like, "What are these idiots talking about?" One of my favorite recent interviews ever for Filmmaker is Robert Eggers being asked, "So, would you ever consider doing a comedy, Robert?"
And he's
And
like, no, absolutely not.
He goes, "No, I make these movies. Why do you think I would ever do a comedy? Why? Why would you ever think I do a comedy?"
And might I raise you, The Lighthouse.
Lighthouse.
You cast Willem Dafoe in 2 of your films. What do you expect?
Who's amazing.
We love Willem Dafoe.
Right. So here's the thing. This is partially a joke because we do kind of want to just look at his films, but also we want to just look at Robert as a guy who makes a lot of movies. Is one of Andrea's favorites, right?
And Nosferatu's
Like,
Nosferatu's my favorite horror movie. So.
Is this like a top 5 director for you?
Actually, not really. I wouldn't say a top 5 director, but one of those. I love Nosferatu, but I can't say I'm a huge fan of like The Lighthouse or The Vivitch.
I am somebody who would not consider Robert Eggers a favorite. I did really like Nosferatu, but Lighthouse is one of the coolest movies ever.
Lighthouse is a bonkers movie. I feel like Godard would love The Lighthouse.
I think
he would.
You know what I think what Godard would say? I think Godard would watch Lighthouse and be like, the director has some interesting ideas, but him making a film based on past technology, he would call dishonest and fascistic. So, wait, really quick. Wait, who is that? Who's that knocking on my door? It's Godard! Come here, Godard!
Hello. You're making a podcast about me. Andrea, do you have any questions for me to ask?
Did you mute the mic?
I muted the mic because I couldn't keep a straight face during the bit.
Andrea, do you have any questions for me? Filmmaker Jean-Luc Godard.
I plead the fifth.
I plead the fifth. You American dog.
Mute the mic again so I don't talk over the bit. Anyways, that's all for some like the hot takes.
That's the end of my career.
And
I'm Gavin Batoey, and
we'll see
sayonara.
you next time.
See ya.